Since beyond this death of person or self, all that remains is a body with no experience of life, of soul, energy, mind, will, the sole question that can arise is, what is the true nature of what remains? Because its true nature remains unknown, all that can be done is to await some resolution to this mystery of mysteries. Its resolution will be the revelation of the eternal Christ, the true nature of resurrection. Obviously, we'll be having a chapter on that. Back to the text. Obviously, there is more to death than organ failure. Death, after all, is just a medical term for as much as most people know of it. There is probably no greater mystery in life than the true nature of death. Apart from its inevitability, man has always tried to give it some meaning. Down the ages, man has come up with numerous theories, yet nowhere in history has its meaning and true nature been a greater mystery or revelation than the death of Christ. No other event has so endured to confront man with the mystery of death than the iconic figure of the man on the cross. This was not just the death of the man Jesus, but the death of Christ, every man's earthly oneness with God. This is the death of every man's person or self-identity in order to become God's own eternal, universal human nature, Christ. It was not for nothing God so dramatized the death of Jesus that it would be known the world over. The man on the cross, the major icon of Christianity, forever links Christ to the mystery of man's death. Like the dual natures of Christ, there is sadness on the human side, glory on the divine side. Yet hidden in the event of everyone's death is the unbelievable truth of Christ. Unbelievable because the true nature of Christ's death, while the same for everyone, cannot be grasped intellectually. Its true nature can only be known experientially, which means everyone will just have to wait and see. To explain Christ's death was a problem for the apostles, Paul and all the fathers. Paul's view of Christ's death as a sacrifice was his Judaic interpretation. The whole notion of sacrificing something or someone, Jesus in this case, in order to merit or atone for something, can be traced back to pagan beliefs and the bizarre myth of appeasing the gods. No need to waste time on this idea. It totally demeans God's revelation of Christ and degrades the incarnation. As noted earlier, Paul's explanation for Jesus' death was his making the cure, Jesus, fit the diagnosis, sin. Given his view that everyone but Jesus was a born sinner, Jesus died so everyone could become as sinless as he was. This is why one can hardly think of Jesus without the cross, his death being more the focal point of Christianity than the incarnation itself. There is not even a feast day in Christianity for the incarnation. Instead, death and resurrection is its central focus and liturgy. But what if Jesus had died of old age? Some accident or disease. What would Paul and others have made of his death? I think that's a really good question. Just pause this and think about that for like 5 minutes. Back to the text. Would this have nullified the revelation and changed the whole understanding of Christ? What would have happened to the idea of sacrifice and suffering to save mankind? And who would believe God died of old age? Certainly it would have robbed Christianity of its major icon, the man on the cross. God's forgiveness and salvation, however, have nothing to do with the incarnation or Christ's death, and to link the two misses the whole revelation of Christ. The fathers, however, never connected the purpose or meaning of the incarnation with Christ's death. If there was any salvific purpose in the revelation of Christ, it was the incarnation itself, Christ's coming for man and not leaving man. Alone, the incarnation was redemptive, and the inhuman kenosis required for its revelation 1,000,000 times worse than anything man could call suffering. Jesus' death could add nothing to this wondrous gesture of God to man. The fathers regarded Jesus' death and resurrection as his humanity's transformation into God's own glorious human nature. They were of one mind. That death and resurrection brought about a radical transformation of every man's nature. Man was created to be more than he is now. This more being his transformation into Christ. Yet the dilemma Paul bequeathed to them was how to explain the death of Jesus as the means of salvation for all mankind. Of utmost importance to interject here is the fact that anyone in the unitive state, theosis, is incapable of any interior suffering. Because the divine center of their being is God and not their own self, they are incapable of suffering. God cannot suffer. Jesus' suffering on the cross was purely physical pain, with no interior, spiritual, or psychological suffering at all. As long as the body exists, it suffers bodily, neurological pain. This physical pain, however, is totally divorced from man's interior life with God. There is a tremendous distinction between interior, spiritual, and psychological suffering and physical pain. This fact, however, can only be known to someone in the unitive state, theosis, and not by those who are not in this state. Again, this is one of her many appeals to experience. Back to the text, bottom of page 346. In this state, the slings and arrows of life simply disappear into the divine center, God that cannot suffer. That interiorly Jesus did not suffer, however, is a fact. Ask those who know the unitive state. While confronted with many trials, the divine center of being is not merely peace, but the abiding joy of life, a joy nothing in this life can ever match or alter. This center is untouchable. That Jesus was in this unitive state is something to keep in mind when considering his suffering and death. The center of his being was in peace. He knew his death as God's will. So be it. This was why the idea that man's salvation hangs on the physical pains of Jesus or any man makes no sense at all. This can only be some pagan idea of a vengeful deity demanding satisfaction for the sins of bad apples. Since the Judaic belief was that only God can save man, a belief held long before Jesus ever appeared, then how was it possible to believe the death of a human being could ever save man? The simplest answer, of course, would be to say, God ordained it that way, and so be it. Amen to the subject. But evidently this was not deemed a sufficient explanation. What, after all, made Jesus so special that his death could link all men eternally to God? For the fathers, the problem was how to forge a link between God saving man and the death of the man Jesus. Somehow this had to be explained, made reasonable, and thus believable. This is my interjection. I think perhaps Jesus took consciousness to its furthest limit, opened up that possibility for each of us, and thereby saved us from ourselves, because at some point we have to go beyond the very need to be forgiven. To resolve this, it might be well to remember both Greeks. Okay, believable. Yes. 347. To resolve this, it might be well to remember both Greeks and Jews believed in the immortality of the soul. Though the philosophers may not have called it a soul, the Latin anima or Greek psyche, yet they believed there was something eternal in man that did not die. Given this belief, the only thing that could die was just a material body. So, if God did not die and the soul did not die, then death is just the cessation of the body's functions, generally everyone's view of death. For the fathers, however, the whole mystery of Christ's death came down to one question: who exactly died on the cross? Anyone capable of grasping the true answer to this question is automatically guaranteed to know the real Christ, because no simplistic answer is possible. This answer is so strategic that, from Paul onward, the true nature of Christ's death was a pivotal consideration of every Christology, Christ forever linked to the mystery of death. There is only one answer to the question, who? It solely refers to some person, a particular human being, And what is the definition of